Hello, my friends. Today, I've got a long trip ahead of me. Got a nice Lexus on the bed, going about 55 miles away. I'll be on a single highway for a while, so figured it'd be a good time to make a little video. I want to rant and ramble a little bit about all the disturbing implications of masking laws that I could think of. Because I made a Twitter post about this recently, and I explained a few of my thoughts about how masking laws, the effect of masking laws is to visibly begin to differentiate and distinguish between the group of people in our lovely population which fully accepts this new philosophy of governance, which really isn't a new philosophy of governance. It's a quite ancient philosophy of governance, going as far back as Plato and his Republic, and the priests of the you-know-whoish people and their book of laws, Deuteronomy, and all that Old Testament shit. It's a philosophy of governance which says that there should be an expert class, a guardian or priestly authority class that has to have limitless control to micro-manage just about every aspect of life in the name of securing life, in the name of doing what is best for us peasants, us little folk. And just to give an introduction into how I think masking laws are sort of a profound leap in that direction, let's imagine that we are a part of that authority class. Let's imagine that we are experts on some kind of advisory board, because that's really how these regulations are determined these days, is through authoritative, secretive advisory boards. Let's imagine that we're on one of those advisory boards and we, just for shits and giggles, want to actually make the masks work. Which, not to go on too much of a tangent, but these are the same people, the same sort of class of highly educated, very wealthy, academic, financial controllers who have been known to say that the world is overpopulated and that we really need to be thinning out the population. These same people are allegedly trying to do what's best for us and protect our health. So that's a little suspicious there, in my opinion, but let's just for the sake of a thought experiment, imagine that we really do want masks to work. If you look up on Mayo Clinic or Cleveland Health or the CDC, you look up how these masks are supposed to work, one thing that they're pretty clear about is that an improperly worn mask is as good as useless. And the fact of the matter is, if you go out in public and look at how people are actually using their masks, most people are wearing them and using them improperly. If you have any facial hair, if you have a beard, your mask is useless. Air will escape through the beard. It does not form a seal. If you don't pinch that thing around your nose down tightly, your mask is useless. You have gaps and then the air escapes all over the place. If you move your mask around to itch your face, itch your nose, pick your nose, your mask is useless. Because you have just been building up whatever infectious material for however long you're wearing the mask, and then you let it all out, you get it all over your hands, you start touching things, and any of these actions completely invalidates your mask. So, as a hypothetical authority expert who wants these masks to work, if you really want to make them work on the population level, you have to also enforce proper usage of the mask. Which is, I mean, if you really think about it, I think it's completely impossible. But if you were trying to really make it happen, you would have to somehow hire squads of people to be out in public, or you'd have to somehow indoctrinate people en masse to horizontally enforce proper mask usage, which means outlawing beards. I mean, at the final level of it, at the final step of the matter, you'd have to outlaw beards. You'd have to outlaw touching and scratching your nose in public. That is the level of micro-managerial control that would have to be enforced in order for something like this to work. And just on a side note, masks are not exactly meant to protect the wearer. I've seen some people I will not mention, saying that masks help to protect themselves and their children. But this is another thing that the experts will tell you. They'll say maybe there's a limited amount of protection that's afforded by a mask. But the fact is that the virus can be transmitted even through the eyes. And the masks aren't actually meant to protect the wearer. They're meant to protect others from the wearer. So this is another aspect of it. It's basically everyone is guilty until proven innocent. Everyone is presumed to have a contagious disease that everybody else needs to be protected from. And that, I think, is why so many people out there are quite agitated if you don't wear your mask properly. Whenever I'm out in public, if I have to wear a mask to be served at a grocery store, for example, I wear my mask under my nose because I'll breathe through my nose then, and it's unobstructed by the mask, which who knows what kind of health effects wearing a mask like that long term will have. So I like to just have it under my nose and breathe through my nose. And I've had multiple instances now of people trying to tell me to cover my nose with the mask. And if it's someone who actually works at the store, I'll just leave the store, go to a different store. But if it's somebody who is just a customer at the store, this has happened to me once. A customer, and a fellow customer tries to enforce proper masking on me at the store, and I passed him 3 times. The first time I just completely ignored him. I didn't even hear him. My wife was with me, and she was like, "Did you hear that guy? He was telling you to cover your nose." I just completely ignored him. Second time, I just stared at him. So we walked past each other again, and he's like, "Your nose, cover your nose." And I just stared at him, kind of blankly, like, what are you going to do about it? The third time I was leaving the store already, had already checked out. He was in another checkout lane, and whenever my wife and I are finished checking out at a store and we're walking toward the door, we'll take our masks off. And so he sees us coming toward him, toward the door, and he's like, cover your nose. And as he's saying that, we both take our masks off completely. And he starts going, mask, just like that. And I couldn't help myself. It was so goofy that I just started mocking him, saying the same thing, mask. It's like a wounded animal, is what it sounded like. So the fact that it's being sold to people as not as a protective measure for the individual, but as a protective measure for society as a whole, for everyone else. You now have a duty to protect the health of strangers. That is something that will help to inspire people like that guy at the store to try to horizontally enforce this type of policy on others. And it's the type of thing that will shame people into accepting proper mask etiquette. It becomes an issue of shame or duty and honor to protect the health of others. And that leads into, I think, a deeper implication of what's going on with the masks. Which is, if we as a society have a duty to protect the health and wellness of others, and not just, the government doesn't just have the duty to protect individual rights, the inalienable rights, the liberty, but it has the duty to instill good health practices among its population, then this isn't going to stop with the masks. This has implications on every possible level of life. It's like, if people accept something like the mask, it's like a biopolitical fantasy come true. Once this philosophy, it's the philosophy that it represents, of we need to have experts that tell us how to protect the general health and well-being of society as a whole, then suddenly things like forced vaccinations, which most people already believe in, become more acceptable, more sensible within the paradigm that's being created. In the future, let's just imagine like the most extreme possibility of, in the future, if something like artificial wombs are perfected and babies can be grown in laboratories, then this sort of logic will justify the idea that natural birth it's too dangerous for both the mother and the baby. And we need to protect the mothers and the babies from themselves and pass laws commanding artificial births, artificial wombs. And there's just really no limit to how much control, how much micromanagement can be supported by this type of philosophy once you've accepted that it is the duty of the expert class to determine the best practices, the best ways to live and to secure life for everyone. these are some reasons just why I think the masks are so insidious, and why it's such a symbolic step forward in biopolitics and in the control and total micromanagement of society from cradle to grave. The time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night. The type of food you can eat. That's another aspect that is involved in this. And the visibility, the fact that you are required to merge with this piece of technology, that your presence in public is contingent upon the fact that you have merged with a piece of technology, that you have applied a piece of technology to your body which shows that you are in agreement and obeying the practices that have been set down for you by the experts. This is a visible distinction, something that visibly distinguishes population groups. It's a step toward the purification, which is another aspect of the rhetoric surrounding biopolitics. It's part of the quote that I gave that I got from Dr. Deep State's video on Twitter. It's a purification program where visibly the wheat is separated from the chaff, so to speak. The people who are in the program of elite management versus the people who are not going by that program are visibly separated. And just like Governor Pritzker of Illinois, the state that I'm from, said the other day on TV, he said that people who are not wearing masks are the danger. They are dangerous. We've already rhetorically, or they, I should say, the ruling class, has already made the rhetorical leap from the virus being dangerous to the people who are not obeying their commands as being dangerous. Everybody is presumed to be dangerous who is not following their commands, who is not visibly displaying on their person a sign of obedience, a sign of faith in the experts. They are the danger. The jump from the virus to the people themselves has been completely made at this point. And I think another thing that I want to touch upon is how this presumption of danger, so to speak, this presumption of guilt, of needing to be purified or needing to be cast out if one does not actively follow and obey and show visibly, publicly profess that they are following this program, is not just found in the virus. It's not just something that we can see in how people treat mask wearers. It's also how people are being treated with regards to things like Black Lives Matter, with social purification that's going on, so to speak, where especially white people are presumed to be racist bigots who need to have their jobs taken away, who need to be kicked out of school, who need to be punished, reprimanded in some sort of way, unless they are actively taking the knee putting the fist up, saying Black Lives Matter, saying the names of whatever criminal thug was killed by the police that week. And this is something you could see in, there's so many examples of it. Like, one that comes to mind is that white girl at, I think, a soccer game who refused to take the knee when they were doing their Black Lives Matter ritual genuflection, their ritual self-flagellation. She refused to take the knee. And because she refuses to actively participate in this visible sign of submission, this visible sign of faith in their new religion, in their narrative, she is immediately demonized, immediately singled out as being a danger, a threat, just like those who refuse to wear the mask. You don't need any evidence that they have the disease. You don't need any evidence that they are bad people that should have their jobs taken away, that should be kicked off their sports teams, kicked out of university, publicly shamed, publicly attacked. You don't need any evidence of who they are as a person. All you need is to show that they are not participating in the ceremony, in the ritual, with the visible sign of submission, the visible sign of faith. That's all you need. So, yeah, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to masks. I think that is about all I had on my mind. I hope you enjoyed some of these thoughts. I hope it wasn't too rambly, too incoherent, or just disorganized. But the fact is that I'm driving a truck on the highway, and you can only be so organized with your thoughts when you're trying to stay in the lanes. And you have a car in the bed, and you're watching the other cars go by, and you have no notes in front of you. Doesn't matter how much practice you have in speaking off the top of your head. It's only so much you can do when you're doing what I'm doing right now. But anyway, in case anyone was wondering, I'll just make some other unrelated notes here at the end of the video for those who are still watching. I've shaved my beard before, don't worry about it, it'll come back. I only shaved it to show off my chiseled jawline and chin. Something that people don't get to see very often. There are a few other topics that I'd like to make videos on soon. One is, I'd like to start making videos just touching on science. Different ideas that aren't represented so much in the mainstream. One interesting idea that I've been thinking about lately and watching some videos on is stellar metamorphosis. And I do believe in that theory. There's a lad by the name of Jeffrey Walensky, who used to be in a Facebook group that I was in, who has developed an idea called stellar metamorphosis, which is the idea that all celestial objects, from stars to planets, not meteors, not asteroids, but stars, everything between nebula, stars, planets, pulsars, are basically the same process at different points, at different stages in its evolution. That the Earth is actually the ancient core, the ancient remnant of a very old star, and that something like Mars is even older than Earth. Something like Neptune is a bit younger than Earth. Jupiter and Saturn are even younger than that, and then the Sun would be the youngest. And that as a star ages, it condenses material at its core and burns off its gases. The gases condense and burn off, and you end up with something like a metallic core, like what the Earth is. And I think that's an interesting idea. Lately, I got back into it because apparently there's the theory that, well, it's not a theory, it's sort of known, it's a well-accepted fact in the scientific field, that the Earth was at one time covered in an ocean. There were no mountains, there were no continents, it was one great ocean. And that's why life originally developed in the ocean. And he was discussing a sort of revisionist theory of the dinosaurs, which is that most dinosaurs were actually aquatic or semi-aquatic. And the more I thought about that, the more it made sense. And there's a lot of reasons to at least consider the theory. And I want to talk more about just things like that at some point. I want to also maybe bring up more about Bill Gates' rope hypothesis. So things like that I'd like to talk about in the future. I do want to start making videos more regularly. It's with my wife moving in, immigrating from Canada, and the fact that she's now pregnant with our first child, who is going to be a girl, by the way. Very excited. All of these things happening has distracted me a bit from making videos. But for the sake of my daughter, my unborn daughter, and future unborn children, I really do want to start laying out more of my ideas and possibly writing a book and things of that nature. So I have something that I can really give to them and educate them with and teach them about. Because we're definitely not going to send them to school. So my wife and I are going to be their main instructors. And in terms of other videos that I'd like to sort of make in the near future, I'd like to react to an article that was published on Richard Spencer's radix.com website. I don't know if it's radix.com or .org. But an article on radix talking about how the shift from, it's called something about loving multipolarity. And it talks about the idea that the shift from the American empire dominating the world to a multipolar political dynamic where China, Russia, America, the EU, they all vie for supremacy and there's no one superpower, how this is going to be a real boon for nationalism. And once the American empire falls, then globalism will cease to, well, not cease to be, but it'll really be weakened. As if America, the American empire, is what is causing globalism. It's amazing that people can actually speak this way about globalism. I mean, look back at the article that I read from the Saturday Evening Post, published in 1909.
We found a faster route via Illinois 1 South, South Halsted Street, which saves 3 minutes. If you prefer to stay on the current route, tap no thanks.
Published in 1909 about how the hidden empire of the world is governed by international finance. They're not based in one country or another. They use different countries to further their agenda, but they're not based in one country or another. Hold on, I need to check what exit I'm taking. They're not based in one country or another. It's an international, rootless empire of financial elites, and they have not been bound to one particular country since the whole project began. They used Britain for a while, they used the Netherlands for a while for the East India companies, they've used Germany, they've used France, they've used America, but they have influence in all of these different countries, and especially they have influence in places like Russia and China. Russia and China are not somehow insulated. They're not bubbles that have kept out the pervasive global influence of this international invisible empire. Look at the things that Putin says. Look at Putin with his tiny hat, kissing the Wailing Wall, talking about how bad anti-Semitism is, talking about how bad racism is, and all these things. The policies speak for themselves. The fact that we might end up going to a situation where there's multiple states and that there's no one superpower doesn't mean that globalism is going to end. It doesn't mean that we are going to be rid of this international financial empire and that their agenda is going to go away. I mean, even with the case of China, in that article I read from 1909, talked about how the Sassoon family, the Rothschilds of the East, already controlled basically all the trade going in and out of China. That doesn't just go away. China's communism was taught to it by you-know-who-ish intellectuals. The systems of the East were taught to them by the tiny hats that have control over the West.
In 2 miles, use the right 2 lanes to take exit 2 for Illinois 1 South, Halsted Street.
I'd like to make a video going maybe further into that idea, but that's about all I have for now. I guess it's a long enough video. It's like, what, 30 minutes, I guess. I'm about to get off the highway, so I will hopefully talk to you guys again soon. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.